Good morning, and welcome to the 2019 Code for America Summit. I'm Dan Hong.
And I'm Corey Zarek, and we're your co-chairs for this year's event. Thank you to everyone joining us today here in Oakland and on the live stream. We're really excited about this year's summit. We're adding all kinds of new things this year, like yesterday's convenings and roundtables, a shorter, more in-depth main stage, dedicated track keynotes, fun lightning talks out in the hallway, and also new this year, me.
And we're bringing back all the old standbys of Summit that we count on each year. Inspiring keynote speakers, dozens of breakout sessions led by many of you, our Thursday night reception, the trusty hashtag CFA Summit for all our dedicated live tweeters, not me, and also me.
It's been fantastic fun getting here. And while that Good Place video we just saw can sometimes feel all too familiar, committees, rules, memos, years to get anything done, we're thrilled to be in a room full of doers, working every day to hack bureaucratic processes to get stuff done.
Before we get into this morning's program, we've got some details that Corey and I want to cover up front. First, our code of conduct. Our goal is for Summit to be a safe and respectful environment for everyone. Our code of conduct can be found in the printed programs and in the app, and we're serious about this. Anyone found to break our code of conduct will be removed. If you've got any concerns, whether for yourself or for others, please immediately email safespace@codeforamerica.org.
Other less important safety information: exits are in the back, restrooms down the hall to the side, and down the hall to this side, and upstairs and everywhere. We'll break this morning as a big group around 10:30, and then the rest of our program will begin again at 11 a.m.
And we couldn't possibly put together Summit without the help of our sponsors. Thank you for generously supporting this year's Code for America Summit, and we'd especially like to acknowledge our partnering sponsors Accenture and Medallia.
And now, on to our first speaker of the morning, Jennifer Palka, founder and executive director of Code for America.
Hi, good morning. Big thank you to Corey and Dan. It has been a real pleasure to enjoy the event this year and the lead up to it, having the two of them chair, and I'm so excited for what they put together. And welcome to all of you to the 8th Code for America Summit. I really think this is such a remarkable event. It is every year. It is particularly this year because you come together from all over the country, and in fact, there are people here from all over the world. And you're here because you're trying to do something really hard and really important, and that's make government work as it should. There are people in government from 42 states, 196 cities, and about 10 different countries represented here, which is totally amazing to me. And I'd like to give a special welcome to start to all the public servants in the audience. Now, I know many of you have been public servants or will become public servants, hint, hint. But for those of you who are doing these incredibly difficult jobs today, I would just like you to raise your hand, and can we all give them a round of applause? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for all you do. You are not the only ones here, of course. Others have come. It's still up to all of us. You're joined by people from the nonprofit sector. If you work for a nonprofit, can you raise your hand? Excellent. You guys are awesome. How about advocates and activists? Maybe some of the same people. Who's here from academia? Yes. Couple of you. Thank you for joining us. What about industry? We have the best people from the government contracting ecosystem here. Industry folks, welcome. You're the awesome. Last but not least, I'm sure there's others of you, but can we give a word welcome to all of the people from our amazing Code for America brigades? Raise your hands, people. Where are y'all? There you are. Yay. Excellent. Thank you, all of you. All 1,300 of you are going to make the next 2 days something really, really special. But the thing is that designing and delivering better government is really about more than the people that we have here today, or the people watching on the live stream, or even the about 10,000 people who've ever come together for this event. It's about more than even the tens of thousands of people who might identify as working in civic tech or public interest tech or digital government, or whatever your term of choice might be. The way of making government work that we are all gathered here to talk about is, let's be honest, still pretty far from the mainstream. There are 22 million people working in government across 30,000 jurisdictions in the US alone. And ultimately, we're going to need to welcome all of these colleagues into the fold. For this way of working to become the new way that government works for people, we need everybody to be part of this movement. We're going to need everyone in a big tent, this big tent. And that's actually what I want to talk about today, making a bigger tent and getting everyone into it. But before we fearlessly charge into the future of a bigger tent, I would like to look back for just a moment. A lot of you have shared with me how you got started in this work, what made you decide that you wanted to do things differently, or what made you want to help make government work better be how you make your community better. I'd like to share a little bit about how I got started. I'm just going to pull up an email that I sent on July 27th, 2009. I sent this email to two colleagues about an event that I was helping produce. It was called the Gov 2.0 Summit. Not to be confused with the Code for America Summit, but actually there's a lot in common. It was just a while ago. So you can't read it, but I'm going to read it to you. There's the date, almost 10 years ago. I wrote to my colleagues, one of whom I'm now married to and is sitting in the front row. I had an inspiring weekend hanging out with Andrew Greenhill, who is chief of staff for the mayor of Tucson. He's in that space where he's just exasperated with how IT works in city government, and he sees there's a better way, and he feels compelled to figure out how to get it there, but he knows he's ill-equipped. He talked about how severe the budget cuts are and how devastating the impacts are going to be on Tucson citizens if they don't figure out some new ways of doing things, specifically reducing administrative and overhead costs and getting citizens more involved. Sample quote from him. I am still reading from the email. I'm ready to go I'm ready to go rogue. There aren't any other viable options. I just don't know how to do it. And still reading from the email, one idea I brainstormed with him was Code for America, roughly based on Teach for America. And then I go on in the email to describe what became the original Code for America Fellowship Program, which we started recruiting for about 6 months after I sent this email. So I look back at this email from almost 10 years ago now, and it strikes me that where we have been can tell us a little bit about where we're going next. As we move towards building a bigger tent, let's talk about what holds us back from doing that. And the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is that idea that we need to go rogue just to do the job that we're supposed to do, just to serve people through government in the way that we know that they should be served. Anyone here felt that? I know that some of you have, because you've told me that. You've told me that many times. It takes an enormous amount of courage to say that what we've always done may feel safe, but it's not going to get the job done. And it can feel like you're going rogue and that there's going to be hell to pay. And sometimes there is hell to pay. I'd like to say that when we have that courage to stand up and say we've got to try something different, it always turns out perfectly. We make great digital services that make them better and faster and cheaper. We serve people better. We're always the hero. And sometimes we are, and we're celebrate that here today. But the reality is that what we're all doing is learning. And learning requires the space to make mistakes. Even if they're small mistakes, unfortunately, there are those who want to jump on even the smallest mistake and make a big deal out of it, even when we know we've avoided a much larger mistake. There is more than one person here today in this room for whom it's been my great honor to offer a shoulder to cry on when things didn't go the way that we'd hoped them to. And that is part of the work that we do together. And it's part of the real work to have that courage, continuing to do it, keeping going because you know it's the right thing, and you hope the next person will have to have a little bit less courage. That is courage on your part, and I really want to honor that. But the courage that is required to change how government works, I will say, does remain a barrier to bringing everybody into this big tent that we need. There's another barrier I see when I read this email, looking back. Back then, as Andrew said, there were the government people like him, and then there were the tech people, the folks that I was supposed to bring in. And too often, that idea that there are tech people and non-tech people keeps us apart, and it divides us. Really, there are just people. There are people who want to make this work. And it's really whoever shows up to drive change. That's what Andrew said to me. I want to be one of this. We need to support the people who self-identify as ready to drive change. It's anybody that wants to do that we need to welcome in. We are all part of this. And then when I move from looking back into the present today, I see more things that can make us hard to bring everybody into the tent. And one of those is that the bar keeps moving. Now, this is a good thing, but it can make it difficult. So what do I mean by that? So for example, our work with our partners at the state of California on delivering SNAP food assistance is a great example of closing the participation gap in the program by continually streamlining the application process and making the benefit more and more accessible to the people who really need it. And we've done this through an iterative process of listening to users over the course of many years now. And you're going to hear a bunch more about this, and here's some great, exciting announcements from Caitlin Docker and Kim McCoy-Wade tomorrow. So I don't want to preview their talk too much. But you're also going to hear about how we started to run essentially the same play, streamlining processes to increase access on a very different problem, the problem of people whose criminal records have been expunged or reclassified by the law, but their criminal records don't reflect it. So these two projects, the SNAP and the Clearing the Records, started out very similar, but they are very different today. In records clearance, we really hit a wall. We went through about 4 major versions of this service that makes it easier for people to apply for records clearance, and then we realized that no matter how streamlined or accessible we made the service, it was never really going to get the job done. Moreover, we realized that the process doesn't really need to exist at all. You're going to hear about this also from Christine and Yvonne tomorrow, and I don't want to entirely spoil what happened next, but let me give you just a little bit of a teaser. So Clear My Record, this project I'm talking about, has been written and rewritten about 6 times now. In fact, the team will say it's many more. And the new product isn't a version of the original product at all. What we're using to clear records today bears little resemblance to what we started with because the real opportunity wasn't to streamline a process. In this case, it was the petitions process. The real opportunity was just to get rid of it altogether and to instantly and automatically clear those criminal records. So does writing a piece of software 6 times sound like an enormous waste of time? It is like literally the antithesis of how it's supposed to be done in government, right? The whole point of gathering all those requirements for your RFP is that you're supposed to get it exactly right the first time. And then you're supposed to live with whatever comes back for like 20 years. But let me assure you that all of this rework has been absolutely worth it because we're closer and closer to something that gets the job done at the scale that we need it to happen. If we had built it once or twice or even 3 or 4 times, we have built something that makes a hard process a little bit better, and that's good. But ultimately, it wouldn't get the job done. Getting the job done means clearing all the eligible criminal records, as the law intended. Getting the job done is making sure that no one has to suffer the burden of a record years after voters and elected officials said they shouldn't have to. And now we're on our way to that goal because we did it in a way that basically breaks just about every basic tenet of government IT procurement in a traditional sense. I should hasten to say we did not break any laws or rules. Everything is very above board. But this is not what we are taught to do. The last few years at Summit, we've talked a lot about how user-centered and iterative and data-driven approaches aren't just how to do technology in government. It's the right approach for policy and operations. It's the right approach for all of what makes up government. Now we're seeing examples of what look like tech projects truly driving new process, new policy, and new law. And how what we learn from users doesn't just help us streamline processes, but throw them out entirely. Sometimes subtraction can be much more valuable than addition when it comes to really meeting user needs. So this takes an enormous amount of political will, and it's really set the bar a lot higher. My point is, I'd love to see more of it, but you don't have to start there. We are all meeting our partners where they are at the right place to get started in this work. And we need to welcome that and understand that while we hold that high bar of where we can really, really make change. So there are a lot of reasons why it can be hard to bring people into the big tent. But despite all this, they are still coming. Our tent is still getting bigger and happily a little bit more crowded. Not many seats out there empty. And that's because as more and more of us practice this approach and get the results that people notice, we have to go rogue less. At Code for America, we are very intentional about this. What we do and what we want all of you to do are basically just three things. Sorry. Get back to the slide. I want you to show what's possible by making government services so good they inspire change. And you're going to see countless examples of this from your peers over the next couple of days here together. 2, you got to help others do that. Help them practice what we call delivery-driven government. You can read more about it at the URL on the slide. It's basically each one teach one, as they say. That is why we are here. And more of us are here than ever. And I want all of you to be people like Rebecca Woodbury from a city of... Yes, she must be here, from San Rafael. So I think Rebecca has brought more and more people to this event every single year. Thank you, Rebecca. People like Dave Wilkinson, who I think is bringing a whole cohort from the state of Connecticut here for the first time. Woo, Connecticut, San Rafael. So people like you are more than ambassadors for a way of thinking. You are actually exemplars of our third strategy, number 3, build a movement of people who believe that government can work for people and are willing to make it real in their own lives and their own communities. Elevate and celebrate that work, and ultimately that brings us back to number 1, because then we have more examples of what's possible and we drive this flywheel together. So this flywheel, this virtuous cycle, is why despite how hard we all know this work can be, we're still going to need a bigger tent. Now, many of you know that I announced a search for a new executive director to succeed me at Code for America last week. I want to thank all of you who responded to that news so generously and thoughtfully and positively. I'm really proud that the organization is at a place, it's in a position to merit new leadership. There's something so valuable there that it's worth resourcing it to take this energy to a greater scale and greater speed. Now, when people talk about succession in nonprofit, they often use that metaphor of handing off the baton, like in a relay race. For me, it's more like I'm moving to a new position on the field, where I can play a different role in moving the ball towards the goal. I am definitely going to be handing off my job to an executive director, to be sure, but it's not so that I can go rest on the sidelines or run some other race. I am definitely looking for someone else to play quarterback, but I'm still going to be in the game, and you're still going to see me here next year. Thank you. And if you know me well, you know that the only thing I like better than a very half-baked sports metaphor, because I really don't actually understand sports at all, is mixing metaphors. So stay with me. For the foreseeable future, I tend to be playing that game right alongside all of you, but under an even bigger tent. So this change in my role is part of why I've spent some time recently looking back into old emails and things like that. But today and tomorrow, I want all of us together to look forward. We're going to look towards where this work goes next. We're going to look at what we can do to build a more fair, just, and equitable systems that govern us, and to whom we can bring into the tent to work with us and grow the movement, especially all you people who are here for the first time. If you've been here for a number of events, please adopt a first-timer and make them feel welcome. Yes, we are going to need a bigger tent. We're going to fill it together, and we're going to make our government really work for all people. Because when I look around this room and I think about what this community represents, I could not be more excited and hopeful. My final words to you are, if we get that slide up, everyone is coming, but it's still up to us. Thank you. So I hope I have left you on a positive note, but I also want to remind you that today is about really the reality of this work. And we have some tough realities to deal with. And our next speaker is going to talk about some of those tough realities, especially as it relates to cybersecurity and the erosion of trust and faith in media and a bunch of other topics that I know will all scare you, but give you all the tools that you need to handle these sometimes scary situations that we're in. Alex Stamos was formerly the Chief Information Security Officer at Yahoo and then at Facebook, when both of those places had to deal with a lot of big, scary things. And he's now doing work at Stanford to help everybody deal with this world that we live in today with some sanity and clarity about what to do next. So please welcome Alex.
Thanks, Jen. Hey, everybody. Appreciate Jen, Dan, and Corey inviting me to be the Cassandra to follow her uplifting speech there. But you know, if you're good at a tone, then why play against type, right? It's probably just better to stick with what I'm good at, which is doom and gloom. And being a little facetious, there's a lot of wonderful things going on. I'm really glad to be here because it's great to be among a group of people who are dedicated to making our government work better, to making our democracy more representative and fair for our citizens, and to be with people who are motivated by the right goals. That this is not a group of people who are here to make money or optimize ads, which are the groups I'm often around. This is a group of people who want to put their talents to good use. So I thought I could talk a little bit, though, about some of the risks we are facing from a cybersecurity perspective when it comes to our society overall and specifically our elections, because there's a lot of things that we're going to need your help on, a lot of things that we've got to work on. And so the first thing I want to say is that the unfortunate fact is that conflict in cyberspace is naturally something that reduces the advantages the United States has built over our adversaries over the last 100 years. Now, that being said, the United States has undoubtedly the best offensive capabilities on the planet. When you look at the offensive capabilities of groups like NSA and Cyber Command, especially combined with our allies in the Five Eyes, the United States is undoubtedly the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to offensive capability. But the use of those capabilities in the U.S. is actually relatively restrained versus elsewhere in the world. There's a funny irony here that people that hack on behalf of the United States are socialists, and people that hack in Russia and China are capitalists. And that if you are hacking on behalf of the national interest of the United States, you're a civilian employee of NSA, you're a military employee of NSA or Cyber Command, or you work for a defense contractor like a General Dynamics or a Raytheon, but you're being paid by the American taxpayer. Where a number of countries have created economic incentives for groups to form to build their own capabilities to fund themselves, who then do hacking on behalf of their national interests as kind of a side project, as exchange for getting cover and protection from the government. And so that puts us at a natural disadvantage in that those capabilities that we have paid for as American taxpayers are rightfully reserved for a much more narrow set of goals than perhaps are seen as national goals in other countries. Another issue is the nature of our society and our economy makes us vulnerable. We have the world's most technology-dependent economy. And the result of that is that makes it much less robust against this kind of attack. So an example of people who were robust against attack was Ukraine. There was a massive attack against the Ukrainian power grid in 2015, almost certainly by elements of the Russian military. And 230,000 people lost power. But they only lost power for 6 hours. And it's because the Ukrainian power grid, while modern in some ways, is still at its base a massively over-engineered Soviet-era analog system. And so they could unplug all of their computers and go throw these huge physical switches and ka-chunk and turn the power back on, right? We don't have that here. If the power went out here in Oakland, PG&E doesn't have a huge Soviet switch from 1957 that they can go flip. We have built our power grid in the name of efficiency and control in a way that is completely dependent upon computer control. We're also uniquely vulnerable to information warfare because of the openness of our society. And I want to just do a quick review of kind of what happened in 2016 from my perspective and why it was specifically targeting the United States. So there's kind of 4 main areas of Russian information warfare in the 2016 election. The first was the social media hacking, the online troll campaign, which took advantage of the fact that we have social networks that don't license people. You don't have to show an ID to get a SIM and to create an account on a social media network like some other countries do. We allow people to have open and free discussion on our social media sites. And we also have a very vibrant discussion in which groups of people can push political ideas that were once considered out of bounds of acceptable political discourse have now become centered in our discourse. And is those specific kind of movements, like, for example, in 2016, the Black Lives Matter movement, that were hijacked by the Russians and try to be subverted into a tool against our own democracy. So the openness we give people to find and to push these issues that are really important to them also makes us vulnerable. There was the hack and leak campaign by a different part of Russia, in this case, the GRU, the main intelligence directorate. And that was a direct technical attack. There was a core cybersecurity issue in the security of DNC systems and the fact that a number of people who used to be super important who are still super important, but they used to be in the government and protected by professional IT folks are now just grandfathers with their own Gmail accounts, that those people are legitimate targets for military actors. That is the cyber component, but the real amplification of the hacking leak campaign, the ability for the Russians to change the entire conversation around the election, was really a vulnerability that is part of our free press. And that we don't have a National Secrets Act, although it looks like the DOJ is going to try to backdoor one in through the Espionage Act attack against Julian Assange, which is another issue. But for the most part, we don't enforce national security laws against legitimate journalists. Every single day, we read important stories from leaked information, and every once in a while, we read a really important story that comes from information that was highly classified. And we don't put journalists in jail for that, and we don't make them give up their sources. But the fact that we have this open and free information economy, and that we protect the press in the United States, also creates this fundamental vulnerability that if you have hacked information, you can strategically leak little parts of that in a way that changes the overall conversation, with the knowledge that the American media ecosystem, that some part of it will cover the story, and that means the entire ecosystem will eventually have to cover that. We had direct attacks against our election infrastructure, which relies upon the fact that we have a distributed federal system. There's something like 10,000 authorities who run election systems in the United States, and that is very difficult for us to protect. And then the fourth category is what is called kind of gray propaganda, which is the fact that we don't license the press and we don't disallow foreign press from operating in the United States. And so groups like RT and Sputnik are allowed to be on cable stations at Best Westerns across the country because we don't control whether or not the media, even if we know it's controlled by US adversaries, whether or not they're allowed to have the freedom of speech that we give to our own media. And so this overall issue is kind of a set of fundamental issues in American democracy, that those fundamental weaknesses are the weaknesses that we cherish, that we call strengths. And I think we should see them as strengths, but it also means that there is a fundamental vulnerability in our system that we're going to have to be really careful about. The other big issue, obviously, that we're going through is the US tech industry is going through a real crisis of public legitimacy. we in tech said we were going to change the world. We didn't really believe it when we said that, right? That's usually a phrase that's used to get venture capital or get 22-year-olds to sign up at a recruiting fair. But it turns out maybe we should have listened a little better to when we said we changed the world. And that we deploy these incredibly powerful technologies and gave a huge amount of individual choice to people without thinking through all the consequences. There are some legitimately hard problems here, and there's some really hard equities that need to be balanced. Equities between privacy and safety, equities between authenticity and the ability to give people anonymous or pseudo-anonymous speech. But the fact is that the companies who are balancing this are doing so generally in a manner that is not open to debate or transparent, and they're acting in a pseudo-governmental manner without the trappings of legitimacy that we often see from democratic governments. The other issue here is that until recently, the major tech companies have resisted responsible regulation. And clearly, these multinational companies, it is difficult for them to say that they want to be regulated by any one country. But the fact that they have successfully resisted regulation in the United States has built a huge back pressure elsewhere in the world for regulation that is perhaps not that well perceived. And so one of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years is that people in the media, people in government react really well to the truth. And people saying, instead of everything is great and wonderful, which is the standard line you'll hear from any major tech company, is to say, the world's actually kind of a difficult place. And we operate at a scale at which we know that there will be hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are going to use our product and who are going to try to use it for some kind of harm. Harm that varies from abuse of individuals all the way up until trying to foment religious violence or celebrate mass casualty attacks. That all of these harms are real things. We're going to deal with it, and we want to have a partnership in doing so. And then kind of the third major weakness we have right now is the United States does not really have a national cybersecurity strategy or a rational institutional framework. We have competent offensive units in the United States. Like I said, NSA and Cyber Command are very, very good at what they do. But all of their incentives are lined up on the offensive side. So you don't get the secret photo of you shaking Obama's hand in the Oval Office because you patched 100,000 servers, right? You get that photo because you blew up Iranian centrifuges. And so the entire incentive structure for our offensive units is on the offensive side. And that is reflected in how the government handles vulnerabilities it finds, what it does after those vulnerabilities leak out to the public. And the fact that these units spend a lot of their intellectual time and capital on finding new bugs more than they do on defending the US. We have defensive units in DHS. They're highly focused on critical infrastructure, which is great. And it's also difficult to say that they have the breadth and depth of experience that we have in the offensive side in places like NSA. And so effectively, we have the FBI as our defensive cybersecurity agency in the United States. And there's a lot of great people at the FBI who are very, very smart and talented. But as law enforcement, they are trained to watch something bad happen, take very detailed notes, and to indict those people 2 years later, right? And that is a model that doesn't work in the cybersecurity world. It is not a model that allows you to lean into these threats and to have a whole of government response. And so, unfortunately, the people who were supposed to pull this all together in the White House got fired. There was some really competent people. And so as a result, we don't really have a national strategy about how we're going to deal with these issues. So some things I think we need to think about as a country and an industry, and some things we can work on together. First, tech industry we need to get our shit together, to be honest. We need to think adversarially in everything we do. So whenever we're building a product, we have to educate ourselves in the ways that those products, similar products, were misused in the past, and prevent those kinds of known bad things. And we also have to think a little more creatively about how they could possibly be used in the future. There's an interesting parallel here between what we're going through in the last couple of years and what happened in the run-up to 9/11. And if you read the 9/11 report, there's a section all about institutionalizing imagination, that there was a lack of imagination in the defensive units in the government of thinking about the different things they would do if they were a adversary that had the same lack of resources that the US adversary did at the time at Al-Qaeda. And we need to do the same thing in tech, and that we've got to be much more imaginative about putting ourselves in the place of the people who want to cause harm with our products, and to think and use our imaginations about how that might happen. We need to figure out how to measure whether or not our products are making the world a better place, and not just if people like them. Effectively, most of the things that tech companies measure to design their products come down to customer satisfaction. Do you like this product? So there's another product that has really good short-term customer satisfaction. It's called heroin. And if you give somebody a shot of heroin, and you ask them 30 seconds later, are you enjoying my product? The answer is inevitably yes, if they can talk at all. Customer satisfaction does not capture the actual impact of that product on that person or the society overall. And that is one of our fundamental issues in Silicon Valley, is we don't have the metrics to measure whether or not we're actually making people better informed, whether they're happier after they use our product, not just addicted to using it in the short term. And that kind of short-term metric focus is one of the things that got us into these troubles. We need to have predictability and transparency in these decisions we make. We're making really important decisions in tech. Decisions like, what is acceptable boundaries of parody and satire in political speech in the United States? That is an incredibly difficult issue. And those decisions need to be made in a very transparent and rational manner so that people get a little bit of predictability, that it's not just a crapshoot of what decisions can be made in a secret boardroom on any of these issues. When we do make these decisions, we need to really base them upon the individual rights and safety. And we need to have a good foundation of when companies decide to restrict the freedom of individuals, they're doing so for a definable impact. Not because it helps the company with PR in the short term, but because it actually makes the community healthier, or it helps keep people safe in the longer term. And we in tech need to figure out some kind of creative way to finance journalism, especially local journalism, in the long run. There's a lot of issues have led to the decline of local journalism, but the fact is that we're at a place where a huge amount of money has been diverted into the tech industry, and that is having real impacts on the ability of people to stay educated. And I'm really afraid that we're going to move to a world where you pay for good journalism and crap journalism is free. And that is a really bad world for our democracy. It's something that is not in the best interest of these companies. It's great for billionaires to go buy outlets and to support them for a while. I'm glad that some billionaires are doing that, but that is not a sustainable solution to figure out a way to share in some of this revenue. We need tech to work with Congress on some reasonable regulatory framework. So I don't have time to go into a lot of the details here, but my colleagues at Stanford and I are publishing 108 pages. So in academia, that's considered like a short white paper. I'm getting used to how much people can write in a weekend in academia. So we have this short beach read, 108 pages, on the election coming out on June 6th. And we're going to be looking at all kinds of areas of attack against the election. It is effectively a follow-up on the Mueller report with recommendations of how do we deal with the facts of what happened that Mueller laid out. And so we'll have a lot more detail in there. But some of the things that I'd like to preview now is, one thing we need reasonable federal US privacy regulation. We need a federal privacy regulator who is competent and has the ability to interpret laws to make them easy to use. One of the real challenges for people trying to operate in Europe right now is that nobody really knows what European privacy law says, because it has to be interpreted by 28 different regulators. And those regulators are loath to give you a get-out-of-jail-free card before there's all the litigation that they want to go through over the next 10 years. And that's a really bad thing for startups. If you're a 20-person company, you shouldn't have to have a full-time privacy lawyer on staff trying to decide how the privacy law applies to every single decision. We need to have a privacy law that gives people predictability so that they can make the right decisions that are privacy preserving, that are good for users, but that they also have the confidence that when they make those decisions that they will not be punished if the goalposts change later. We need cybersecurity legislation that helps small and medium businesses. We talk all the time about these attacks against the big companies, but the truth is the big companies kind of have to take care of themselves. There's a whole host of organizations in the United States who are completely screwed if they go up against one of these adversaries, right? And that is a serious issue that we don't talk about enough. We need, around elections, we need to pass something like the Honest Ads Act with a lot more teeth around non-electioneering ads. And so this is something we go into great detail in the report, but one of the challenges we have right now is the interference by folks like the Russians is not actually classified as political advertising under current US law because it doesn't say vote for or vote against. It is about issues. And so we need to control that kind of issue advertising, restrict its hyper-targeting of it, have real transparency requirements. There have been changes here, but those changes have all been voluntary, and they've only been done by a handful of companies. And so we need to bring some kind of standard to the entire advertising ecosystem. And as companies ask for regulation, we need them to do so compliant with a consistent human rights framework. And that's one of the real fears I have about what's going on right now, is that pivoting to push all of these problems and decisions on the governments means that a number of governments that are not respectful of human rights are also going to be making some of these decisions. And so when we say there needs to be more regulation, we need to put an asterisk on that, saying more regulation compliant with basic human rights standards. Because we don't want the things that we do in the US and other developed democracies to be used as an excuse to turn the internet into a tool of oppression globally. In the US, we need to have a defensive cybersecurity agency that just does defense and no law enforcement. Other democracies have this. In Germany, they have this thing called the BSI. In France, they have a group called ANSI. But the truth is that in other countries, there are coordinating bodies that have the ability to plan ahead and to coordinate an all-of-government response on all of these issues. And we need to work towards international norms that are better. The truth is we're in this weird world where nation states can do things to each other that, if done in the physical world, would be considered an act of war. But in the online world, we just consider it like a Tuesday, right? And that norm is really, really dangerous. It's really dangerous for us as a country, but it's dangerous for citizens globally, because the number of attacks that are done by countries against their own citizens is going up continuously. And allowing these norms to exist where you can hack journalists, hack activists, hack students, and that's just considered a normal part of managing a democracy, that is a completely inappropriate norm to exist. And so there's some things that we've got to do in academia, and we're working on this. We need to change how we educate people. So one of the things we're doing at Stanford is we're teaching cybersecurity classes for non-CS majors, because we need to have people from all kinds of backgrounds and disciplines in the computer security world to help inform these decisions. These are not just technical problems. They are sociology problems, psychology problems, political science problems. We're also building tools to study these issues. We're building this thing called the Internet Observatory, and the goal there is to build the technology, tools, and processes necessary to support good public policy and social science research. We're educating the next generation. We have a master's in cybersecurity policy at Stanford now, so a number of people here might be interested in making a career pivot. This is a great opportunity for both current undergrads and mid-career professionals to study both the technical and the policy sides of cybersecurity. We have the tools and we have the talent, to quote my favorite 80s movie. We have to execute properly, and we need to execute as a society overall. And one of the things that really makes me afraid right now is that it seems that everybody is lined up in their corners. And we can't have that. We need civil society, we need citizens, corporations, and government all working on this together. Because in the long run, making the United States secure against cyber attack is not just good for us, but it will set good standards for how people around the world are treated and for the protection of democracies against autocrats. And we really are war against creeping autocracy. And we've got to keep that in mind when we make these decisions. So hopefully we can find ways to work together on this, because I'm really afraid that if we don't put all of our best people behind it, we are going to fall behind. That being said, groups like this make me confident that we're on the right path. So I want to thank you guys. I want to thank Jen and the rest of the team for having me here. I hope you have a great summit. Thank you very much.
Next, please welcome in conversation with Robin Scott, CEO and co-founder of Apolitical, Vivian Graubard, Director of Strategy for Public Interest Technology at New America, Kavi Harshawat, co-founder of Good Citizen, Nina Schultz, Research Director at the Center on Immigration and Justice, Vera Institute of Justice, Marina Nitsa, Public Interest Technology Fellow at New America, and Adam Williams, Assistant Administrator for Community and Planning Services at the Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families.
morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here moderating this conversation, which in a room of so many smart technologists who've done so much to make government better could seem almost heretical, because we're here to talk about why technology isn't always the right solution, and certainly isn't always the first solution. And just to get a sense of where the audience is on this issue, can you raise your hand if you have worked on deploying technology to solve a public sector challenge? And can you keep your hand up if that technology hasn't fully delivered on its promise in the way you expected? Okay. So to help us explore this question, we have fabulous panelists and two situations where the stakes really couldn't have been higher. So first of all, we have Adam and Marina talking about foster care in Rhode Island. Now about 450,000 children are in the foster care system across the country, and there's around 3,600 in the Rhode Island system. So that's about 5 times the number of people in this room. Then we will turn to the border crisis, where last year, I believe within the space of months, around 2,300 children were separated from their families, and that's of around 450,000 adults who over the course of a year are detained. So we're talking very large numbers. And we have Nina, Viv and Kavi to talk about that. Now, before we jump into exploring the question directly, just to give a sense of the authority of our panelists to speak to this, I'd like to ask them each briefly to talk about the moment in their career that is most significant, that they're most proud of.
Thank you, Robin. One moment that I'm really proud of, in 2014, I was a tech advisor to President Obama's task force to protect students from sexual assault. And one day after work, we invited 6 student survivors to the White House to talk about their experiences and aim to understand the ways in which policies were and were not working. And one thing that became quickly evident was that none of the policies that we designed in Washington, D.C. were working as intended out in the wild, right? All of these measures that we had put in place to protect students were not doing their job. And it was an incredibly humbling moment, a reminder that the things that we do in Washington, D.C. often do not work as intended. And our ultimate recommendations are better when we include the people in them throughout the process who are most impacted by the decisions that we're making. And it was very special personally to be able to have these students at the table.
Thank you. Kavi?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest and most important moments in my career so far has been when we were starting the digital service, actually, with Marina at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we had been spending months and months trying to get access to a simple, to Teams API, essentially, to find missing records at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we had literally spent months trying to find laptops and get access to Wi-Fi and fill out the paperwork to get this simple access. And finally, after those 6 months, we finally saw data come through this API, and we were able to find those records, and our whole team was just ecstatic about it, up in arms, super excited about it. That was a pretty big highlight.
Thank you. Nina?
So I learned last summer that my 5-year-old was going around telling people that I was going to be responsible for Jeff Sessions losing his job. So I'm pretty proud of that's what my kid thinks I've achieved. And the reason she thinks that, I've spent the past couple decades doing research on the human impacts of immigration policy, and a few years ago left academia to return to the policy world. I now work on a team that has a simple, bold vision that anybody facing deportation in the United States deserves to go to court with the help of a lawyer. And we have built a network of programs that is working towards that goal. And at a time when we have people at the highest levels of our government threatening the protections that our immigration laws offer, we've been able to use evidence to convince local, state, and federal government to invest in deportation defense.
Great, thank you. Adam?
Yeah, in fall of 2016, I left my career in Chicago, where I was doing marketing for and testing of different public policy, public health programs in the Chicago area, and joined something called Foster America, which, if you've never heard of it, is a program that takes talent outside of the world of foster care and child welfare and brings that talent into the field. It was brand new, and I had no idea what I was going to get. And about 2 weeks into the training, and that was all we got, was 2 weeks, I had I must have had a look on my face one day, because some of the movers and shakers in the field who had come to kind of help provide the training looked at me like, "You are panicked." And I just said to myself, like, I don't know, I can't tell yet if there's a place for me in this field. And they looked at me, one gentleman in particular, and said, "If you want to bring your skills to the foster care world, like, we will have you for as long as you will be, or as long as you're willing to contribute them." And I think that at that moment I found a calling that I don't know that many people have the privilege to get. And so here I am in it for life.
Fantastic. Marina?
For the first 4 years where I was the Chief Technology Officer of the Department of Veterans Affairs, we were not allowed to use cloud computing because the Inspector General said you could not put it in an evidence bag. And so after 4 years of lunches and coffees and trust building and earning political capital, the highlight of my time there was getting a memo from the Inspector General saying that we were allowed to use the cloud.
Fantastic. So we have a panel of people who found their calling and have been extremely effective in tackling problems. Adam, I want to turn to you. Can you take us to Rhode Island and the situation facing the foster care system?
Yeah, so Rhode Island has historically been one of the worst states in terms of placing children in families when they need foster care. When they don't get homes, they end up in a group home or a congregate care setting. It's, in my mind, basically a modern-day orphanage. And so I was asked to come there to help them address this issue, and Marina has a specific technology role that she's playing in this. And if you skip forward, that was in 2016. If you skip forward to January of 2018, we had kind of a mini crisis going on where there was an uptick in the number of children coming into our care because of the opioid crisis, and also an uptick coming in because of a situation regarding a principal who failed to report abuse and neglect. And then after he was disciplined for that quite harshly, the phone just started ringing on every incident you could possibly imagine that happens in a school. So we were seeing a lot more kids coming into care and needed to take action. We decided at that point to, in an 8-week time period, completely rethink the way that we recruit and train and license our foster families. We set up a convention, not unlike this, and a very small team of about 6 or 7 people managed to bring in 174 families to get trained at once. To give you some context, normally a class would have about 15 families in it. They'd sit in a circle and talk for a number of weeks. We decided to do this in a 3-day period where they would come and boot camp style get the bulk of what they needed to participate. To complete their licensing. It was also a response, I think, to a demand that we saw from families that the time period was just very long, and there was a barrier to from helping that families wanted to do because of because the format of becoming a foster parent was a little bit cumbersome.
Super. Marina, tell us, why were you there working on this problem?
So 2 summits ago, I was preparing to leave my role at the VA, and I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew I wanted it to be in foster care. And so I told everybody that, which is my main advice: tell everybody what you want to do next. And my former boss at the White House, Richard Kulata, had become the Chief Innovation Officer of Rhode Island. And my former colleague from the White House, Sherry Lockman, had gone on to found Foster America. So they invited me to Rhode Island for the day to meet their child welfare team. I met Adam, and I think totally fell in love with the problem and saw ways that we could use human-centered design and technology to help fix the licensing process and beyond.
So you fell in love with the problem. How did you approach it, and what lessons and mistakes did you make along the way?
So the approach was initially around, there was an interest in doing data-driven recruitment of foster families because, as Adam said, there was not enough. But I think when we dug in and Adam showed me the way and the ropes of Rhode Island, that when you actually crawled through the process, it was so long and cumbersome that a lot of families were dropping out. So we really had to focus on first things first, and not necessarily technology first, but just what were there ways that we could map out a more streamlined process that then we were able to actually try at recruitment weekend and validate.
Yeah, I think the weekend really shined a light on, why weren't these things being done sooner? I mean, so much of this process really could be done if you just got families in for 2 hours and knocked out a lot of paperwork, and I think that Marina's work really highlighted some of those things. I would also offer on the flip side that one of the things that we made sure to do when we trained and licensed 174 foster families is that you cannot use technology to replace the fact that you still have to build relationships with these families. You have to know, you have to sit in their living room and have tea, which we did even in that 8-week time period. You have to know their dogs' names and encourage them to get vaccinated. You have to, you have to know what their fears are and what their preconceived notions are, and you have to address those during the training, and none of that can be replaced just because you have kind of an expedited way or because you've inserted technology. You still have to have those intimate relationships because becoming a foster parent is a life-changing experience.
And you were sometimes under pressure to use technology first. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think a lesson I've learned hard in my career by screwing it up a few times is that the last thing we wanted to do was build a custom Ruby on Rails foster parent licensing tracker. And so as frustrating as it was sometimes to wait and go through procurement processes and official channels, it was really important that the solutions that we aimed for were sustainable beyond me and Adam.
Super. So we're going to come back to you, but going to go now to the border. Who in this room was involved in some way in the border crisis and trying to solve it? So maybe five or six hands. Nina, can you paint a picture and take us there?
So we at the Vera Institute run and coordinate national networks of lawyers at nonprofit organizations around the country who work with adults and children in detention. And at the end of 2017, we started to hear kind of ad hoc reports of children and grown-ups being separated from each other. And that began to escalate over the beginning of 2018 and crystallized in what became an official policy the administration announced just about a year ago now called zero tolerance. And under this policy, they were announcing that they were going to start referring for prosecution any adults who entered the country without presenting themselves at an official port of entry. And what that meant was the children those adults came with were rendered what the government calls unaccompanied. They were separated from their adults and sent to the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which runs a network of shelters that detain children around the country. In the space of about 1 month, around 2,300 children, we believe, were separated from their grown-ups. And this is a field in which we never have enough resources to serve everybody, and people were left scrambling, trying to figure out what was an official policy that was unclear even to those implementing it, that was changing every day. The adults were not told where their children were sent. The shelters that received the children were not told that the children had been separated. Many of them were too young to be able to articulate themselves that they had been taken from their parents. And the public has since learned that the many electronic systems the government uses to track people in immigration proceedings were not used to identify the fact that these grown-ups and children had been separated, so there was no official record keeping that would have identified who was taken from whom.
So the available technology wasn't even being used.
That's right.
Okay, so we have this situation, 2,300 kids. Viv, how did you end up there with Kavi?
Yeah, so I get a phone call on a Saturday morning from Cecilia Munoz, who spoke here last year. She's been an immigration advocate her whole life, that there's a lack of resources, there's this crisis. We're all asking ourselves, what is the role of technology in helping, to help resources go further and figure out how we can get more children back together with their parents and to find them legal support and legal representation. And it became very clear. The first time I spoke to Nina, she was shopping at a Home Depot on a Saturday morning, and I was like, what is happening on the border? And it became very clear that without physically being there, it was going to be super difficult to figure out where a team of technologists could be helpful. And so I emailed a bunch of people and said, who is available to go to McAllen, Texas with me tomorrow morning? And Kavi canceled a family vacation to hop on a plane to go. And we arrived, we were meeting with lawyers, we were going to detention centers, and we ended up at a shelter called Catholic Charities Respite, where they were seeing 200 families per day that were coming from ICE detentions and helping process them and reunite them with their family in the U.S. in a shelter the size of a classroom. Adults all had ankle monitors on them. The children had not received any health care over the course of 2 months. They were all wearing the clothing that they were wearing throughout their 2-month journey. We had to be there, right, to fully understand the gravity and the level of crisis. And one thing that became immediately clear was that all of this that was happening was not a problem that technology could solve. And we were getting phone calls from all sorts of researchers and consultants from across the country that were like, how can facial recognition help? I'd love to deploy my new untested DNA testing kit to solve this problem. We had one funder tell us that they would love to give us money to work on this, but we had to use blockchain. They didn't know how or why, but some Microsoft consultant got to them before I did, and they were holding us ransom. They were saying we will not fund this unless you can tell us that you're using blockchain. And fortunately, other people stepped up to help us figure out where we could be the most helpful.
We were having to communicate. Chatbots won't be helpful in detention where you can't take your cell phone.
Yeah.
But you did, Nina, you kept a database of facial recognition providers, right?
Yes, I got so many offers of facial recognition technology that we kept a list just in case we ever need that technology in the future. We're trying to find a way to put those people to good use.
Kavi, you and Viva in the shelter, incredibly fast-moving environment, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress and a lot of distress. Can you talk a little bit about what you did and what you learned?
Yeah, one of the things that we saw while we were there is just so many people coming through and kind of crisis tourism almost. There was just people who were in gaggles coming, taking pictures of the scene, reporters, visiting officials who'd come take pictures and then leave. They wouldn't actually help. And meanwhile, you have this room full of hundreds of migrants overflowing into the parking lot. And even the people who were trying to help out, who were visiting through, they're really coming and playing with the kids or maybe handing out water. And so we were asking ourselves, okay, well, what is the actual thing that's needed, both from a technology perspective and more than that? And from the tech perspective, the woman who runs the shelter, Sister Norma, who's an amazing person, she basically started the shelter and has been doing this work for years and years. Basically came right up to us as soon as we walked through and said, you guys are from the White House? You guys are techies? I need a TV, I need a bus schedule, I need Chromebooks, I need a better intake form. And that was it. She knew exactly what we needed. And aside from that, it wasn't about technology. As Viv mentioned, it's not the fancy, flashy blockchains. It was, we literally, the most helpful thing we could do is get cell phones for people to call their family members who they'd been separated from and buy a bunch of McDonald's for dinner for everybody in the shelter.
So you guys ended up working together, the three of you, but in fact they didn't meet until earlier today backstage. Nina, can you talk a little bit about the second project?
So we realized at the Vera Institute that because we run this national network of legal service programs, we actually knew which lawyers had talked to which children everywhere around the country. And what we needed was to find the grown-ups so we could put them in touch with the lawyers who were seeing separated children. And so we launched a project we called the Immigrant Connection Network. We set up a war room overnight. We got a cell phone. We assigned multilingual staff. to operate the war room, and then we were put in touch with Viv because New America was looking to put its technology to good use.
And let's talk about failures, because this has kept me up very often over the course of the past year. The moment of a crisis, I have decided, I sort of knew previously, I have decided definitely is not the time to deploy any sort of new technology. There were moments when I was having to pick up the phone to call Nina or someone on her team and say, is this thing that we're building right? There's this ragtag team of volunteers that I'm so grateful for, but already I feel like we're making bad technical decisions, not just using Airtable because we should build something custom. It was very stressful. And the question that I had to ask myself every time was, if I call Nina right now, am I going to take time away from actual lawyering and legal resources and helping people on the ground to ask them some question about technology that we could build, when email and emailing Excel spreadsheets might give everyone in here all sorts of nightmares is actually the most productive thing to do right now. So every second of it felt like I have to be very careful about what I'm asking, because it is almost irresponsible and reckless to think that my goal of figuring out how technology can be helpful is actually the most important thing at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that to build on that, one of even the technology that we were trying to build, it just wasn't the right time or the right environment to build it, right? Because there was, a constantly changing environment. I think faster changing than either of us had ever seen working for the federal government, where, the administration was changing its policies on a nearly weekly basis in response to ACLU's lawsuits against it and just other circumstances. And so the things that you tend to rely on, even if you're doing all the right things, you're taking time to consider security, and you're taking time to consider how you might iterate on this product and build the right thing and gather information about the environment on the ground before just building a product. You try to do all those things, but it doesn't work out in that situation, because you're trying to build it in the midst of this emergency situation, this crisis.
There were more lessons that we learned about the critical infrastructure that needs to be set up prior to a crisis, the way that emergency planners think about work, than in the moment of a crisis. And unfortunately, the immigration space has not been in a crisis for a decade now, and so finding that time to talk about information sharing between 30 organizations across the country is just a luxury that we haven't had in the space for a long time.
Yeah.
So when we look at what works around the world at Apolitical, we often come to the conclusion that trust has to be the fundamental platform. Tech is not necessarily the fundamental platform. Marina, there's much that resonates between these two stories. Can you talk briefly about trust building and what you've learned about how to accelerate that building?
Sure. I think it's about the human connection. And as Kaveh mentioned too with Sister Norma, it wasn't about showing up with a fancy form. It was about him cleaning up vomit off the floor. And that was what impressed her enough to build some trust. And I think Adam did a really amazing job of this in Rhode Island too, which was not showing up and saying, I'm the amazing expert, I'm going to fix all of your things. It was being really humble, helping them refine their Excel spreadsheet so that it worked more effectively, and kind of working with people where they are and earning their trust that way.
Super. So just to conclude, I'm going to ask everyone on the panel to share the question that they would advise others to ask themselves in these fragile, high-stress situations to avoid embarking on the wrong solutions too quickly. Viv?
Yeah, am I doing more harm than good? We are all going to make mistakes in this incredibly difficult work. So why are you doing it? And if the answer keeps you up at night, you should reconsider your path.
Kaveh?
I think considering whether, if there's an emergency or crisis that you are not thinking about today that you should be planning for and preparing for in the future, you should think about that.
Yeah, I think we know that high-tech solutions aren't always the answer to the low-tech immigration field that I work in, but we also have learned that we really need to pause and build the infrastructure so we can take advantage of what technology has to offer before the next manufactured crisis comes. And we're already seeing that children are beginning to be separated from their parents again, and we still don't have that infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
Adam?
Yeah, I think the question that I would ask to myself is, have I really engaged with the people that I'm trying to serve and assume nothing? I think too often we think that we know what people need, and rather than engage with them and have them at the table, and so that we're co-designing things in a way that that makes sense for them and addresses their most immediate needs first.
Yeah. And then ask yourself also, is this solution something that the organization can sustain beyond me? Or will they be calling you until you're 85 years old to fix bugs? And if you answer these questions correctly and would like to work with us, Foster America is recruiting for our next cohort at foster-america.org.
There you go, your call to action. There's so much more to say on this question, but we're at time. Please give a big round of applause to our inspiring panel.
Wow, what a great and important discussion from Viv, Kavi, Nina, Adam, and Marina on how easy it is to fall into technology solutionisms that are a distraction from being helpful and actually solving real and urgent problems. And thanks to Alex for his important remarks on protecting our democratic systems and the need for the tech industry to really step up to their societal responsibilities.
How are we all doing so far? Good? Alex's talk doesn't have anyone running toward the exits?
Nervous laughter there. And I'm thinking maybe next year we could probably do a bullshit buzzword bingo card, including blockchain and facial recognition. I'm kidding, maybe. I'm kidding, I'm sure blockchain is definitely useful for something.
Right. Next, we're going to hear from Laura Ramos. She's the Senior Director for Integrated Benefits at Code for America, and she'll introduce the progress her partners have made when we rethink the social safety net. Welcome, Laura.
Hi. So there are many efforts across this country to help people in need of food, health care, or a little help covering expenses like utility bills. Programs like these provide assistance that can make really all of the difference in the world to help somebody in a difficult moment in their life. Now, billions of dollars in benefits get distributed through these programs, and an equally significant amount of money goes into the technology behind them. Despite these many best intentions, we have a safety net system that often forgets to consider the human element, the needs of the people these programs are trying to serve. In the conversations we have had with state and policy leaders, we often get asked, how can we make this better? How can we shift our approach to consider the outcomes we all want? In this case, we believe we must create a safety net that is human-centered, equitable, responsive, and ultimately helps the people in need. Code for America's work as part of the Integrated Benefits Initiative focuses on creating these proof points that demonstrate how a human-centered, iterative approach to delivering safety net benefits is possible. Tonight, I'm so excited to bring on stage a few of the partners we have been working with to bring this vision to life. We have been collaborating with these state and policy leaders on pilot projects that take on specific touch points in the process clients and states go through to apply, maintain, and enroll people in benefits. You're going to hear 3 different perspectives about why it is so important to keep clients in the center of how benefit systems are designed and administered. And while that can seem like an obvious goal, and I hope that to many of you it does seem obvious, it actually gets really lost in the middle of some very complex policy landscapes, bottom line oriented state legislatures, and some very rigid software development life cycles. This scenario plays out in every state in this country and hinders our ability to effectively serve people in need. Each of our presenters play a critical role in bringing these programs to life, and I hope you enjoy their stories because I really enjoy each one of these folks coming up on stage. Together, we're all working to create the safety net that this country deserves. And with that, I'm very excited to bring on stage Stacy Dean from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks to Laura and the whole Code for America team for having me here today. So I'm here to share just 2 of the reasons that I believe states struggle to build health and human services systems that offer holistic support that's easy to use and navigate. To be fair to our colleagues in government, and I think it's really important to start from this place, the safety net does an extraordinary job every day for tens of millions of Americans right now. 1 in 5 Americans gets their health coverage through the Medicaid program. 1 in 8 Americans use SNAP or food stamp benefits to pay for their food every day. Our country is better off because states deliver these benefits to struggling people today. But we all know that we can do better. Government can lower the cost and difficulty for individuals who need help in order to meet their basic needs, as well as offer that support in a more coordinated and holistic way. So, what is standing in the way of that? First, there are enormous pressures and institutional norms that encourage federal, state, and county officials to think only about their piece of the safety net, rather than considering how the Health and Human Services programs as a whole serve families in their states or communities. And that's really true all the way up through senior leadership, including the governor, where the safety net, I think, is often viewed as a collection of programs and services housed in an agency umbrella, rather than a systems of supports fueled by a vision for service delivery and citizen engagement. So let me give you an example of how the piece-by-piece approach can play out. All pregnant women, infants, and toddlers who receive their health coverage through Medicaid automatically qualify for the WIC program. WIC provides supplemental foods and nutrition services and counselings to this group, including breastfeeding support. WIC is an incredibly popular program amongst eligibles, and virtually all eligible moms enroll themselves and their kids in this program. So they are both in Medicaid and in WIC. The policy is simple. If you get Medicaid, you can get WIC. But states often make these households fill out separate applications, require redocumentation of their circumstances. And I've actually seen moms stop by the WIC clinic on their way home from the hospital after having delivered a baby in order to update their case and add the baby to the WIC program. That's something that Medicaid lets them do over the phone from the hospital bed. So what's the problem here? It's not the policy, right, or the inability to come up with a smart, comprehensive solution. Tech could solve that. The problem in this particular case, or in many cases, is that the people in one program, Medicaid, ask themselves the question, what can we do to make it easier for a new mom to enroll an infant in health coverage? A reasonable question. But what they didn't ask is, what can our state do to help a new mom connect her infant to all of the services that we offer? To me, that's a really vivid example of where staying in your lane really limits how states envision what the safety net can do. So here's a second challenge of bringing human-centered design into the health and human service delivery world. It's not always clear within a state who is steering the ship on technology and service delivery. The IT systems that support these programs are sprawling, I think is the best word I can come up with. No one owns them end to end. They're often old, they're quilted together with a lot of disorganized governance. New systems and upgrades can be multi-year efforts that span several turnovers in agency leadership, further undermining, I think, clear ownership, accountability, and a consistent vision for how technology should be supporting a state's business model. So for a variety of reasons, the technology side of service delivery often seems outside of a state's control. I think there's also a sense, just be candid, that vendors in this space have adapted their business models to monetize this dysfunction, rather than putting forward solutions and ideas that would advance cooperation and a human-centered approach. So for some states, these and other issues just feed into a culture of keeping programs and services apart and split, considering technology as something that happens to states rather than something that states lead and shape. So these are challenges, but they are not insurmountable barriers. They haven't prevented many states from advancing significant improvements in service delivery and technology. State officials aren't just creatures of their agency ecosystems. They also live in 21st century America. They see the technology and how it improves their own lives, and they can see the difference between what they get to enjoy and what they're offering the people that they are trying to serve. So there's a real appetite among states to figure out how to bridge from their current service delivery models to a place where they'd be serving citizens more responsively and holistically and respectfully. And you're going to hear from Louisiana and Colorado shortly about small steps they're taking that really have a big impact on the way that clients experience their programs and services. They're asking the right questions about how can we do better for the people and build a philosophy of service delivery that helps drive ongoing improvement across the array of programs. But states need help to make these changes and more changes. I encourage you all to consider how you might equip them with tools and skills and information like model RFP or contract language that helps them spec, procure, project manage, and measure human-centered design. They honestly don't know how to do it, and you all probably have a lot to offer them. Teach them the powerful difference between listening to clients to gain information to inform decisions rather than listening to reinforce a pre-existing plan. Demonstrate that it's possible to test and try different approaches on a small scale to build evidence for a new direction. And finally, I think we need to create accountability by asking states, with humility, given all that they do accomplish now, questions like, will this plan change actually make it easier for a new mom or easier for you? So with the help of people like you in this room, I think we can help states in their quest to build better systems for their citizens. So thank you, and with that, let me bring onto the stage Terry Ricks. She is the Deputy Secretary of Louisiana's Department of Children and Families. Terry.
Bienvenue. In Louisiana, our land is diverse, our ideas are diverse, and our people are diverse. From the original Native American inhabitants to the French, Spanish, Acadians, Africans, from the Yugoslavian oyster harvesters to the Sicilian strawberry farmers, nearly every nation on earth has left his imprint on Louisiana's culture. I love that statement from Governor John Bel Edwards. It describes the rich culture and history of Louisiana. We're a fun people. We're interesting. We love football. We like fishing. We like festivals. And of course, we love Mardi Gras. We really are a strong, resilient, hopeful people, in spite of, and maybe because of, some very difficult circumstances. In Louisiana, nearly 48% of Louisiana households are using safety net services or are one paycheck away from needing them. 29% of our population are on SNAP. 75% of Louisiana's children are covered by Medicaid. That tells me that our clients are not some distant minority. They are our neighbors. The role of agency executives is to be honest. When we came into governing in 2016, there was a $1.9 billion deficit. The safety net program staff and resources had been cut, and our caseloads were soaring. We also came into very differing views about the role of government in people's lives. We've had to be honest about what role agencies can play in this moment. The truth is, if someone comes to the Department of Children and Family Services hungry, we are not able to feed them today. So we work with our partners like the food banks. So we had to be honest that we're just one piece of a larger safety net. We've had to be honest about our information services system challenges. The administration has been building a statewide, interdepartmental enterprise architecture. We've been trying to retire all of the legacy systems, and currently they're integrating the eligibility systems for Medicaid, SNAP, and TANF. You can probably guess that this change in staff and support makes everything tricky. The last thing we had to be honest with is how we treat our people. When they're coming to us in their most vulnerable state, do they feel helped and respected? We need to really figure out how to meet people where they are. Enter Code for America. We really had to figure out before doing anything else if Code for America was actually legit. It took us a little while, but once we did, we've been extremely excited to work with them. We saw it as an opportunity to further our desire to deliver client-focused services. The engagement includes 4 of our agencies: the Governor's Office, the Department of Children and Family Services, the Department of Health, and our Office of Technology Services. The first component of the work I was very excited about. It was to map the clients' and staff's experiences relative to our service delivery. Code for America brought us their voices. We heard that the SNAP program is really important to families. We heard that many SNAP families have to start over again in 6 months. We heard that the clients really do want to help people in a really special way. When I think about a single mom of 3 saying these words right after saying, I can't get by without these benefits, but I have to start over every 6 months, it helped me to realize we need to fix this. We heard the voices, we reviewed the data. In 1 month, more than 12,000 cases were closed because of process reasons. Someone missed an appointment. They failed to give us a document that we needed. Loss of benefits causes household instability, frustration, and a lot of anxiety for those who are already in hardship. They're already hurting. And the other thing is that it's seriously inefficient for staff. This is churn. Churn is not new, but when we heard the voices and we put the data together, we realized that we need to fix this. With Code for America's help, what we realized is there may be an actual new approach to this, that we can fix this. States do need to test out new ways to understand what the client experiences and perspectives are. This engagement allowed Louisiana to recognize our clients' phones as their lifelines. Everybody's texting. You guys are texting. Some of you are texting now. My kids are texting. Our clients are texting. I needed a reminder to get here today. Did you need a reminder to get here today? Our state steering committee decided on the LaMessage pilot. The idea is that timely, specific text reminders will help clients maintain their much-needed benefits and reduce churn. I have to tell you, the early results are promising. For the Department of Health's WIC clients in the pilot, we're seeing appointment show rates increasing by 65%. Clients are also proactively rescheduling their appointments at an almost 25% rate. Can you imagine the impact this is having on the clinics, managing time and resources? Well, I'm very excited because this month, some of our SNAP and TANF clients started receiving also reminders through text. We believe the text reminders will really work. The WIC data gives us a lot of hope that this simple reminder could grant some stability to a household that might otherwise lose benefits and cut down on the casework and reduce the churn. DCFS employees, I believe, are the best in the business. They are passionate and compassionate. Those that have been a part of the pilot are super excited about what they think it will bring to their mission. They want to improve clients' lives. They want better results. They want to treat the clients with dignity and respect. We speak in our administration about a breeze of hope, driving change as mighty as the Mississippi. We are a state government as hopeful as our people are. That's what they deserve. We are glad that the breeze blew in Code for America to help us do better by the state. We're so excited about you guys being a part of it too. Come join us in Louisiana. I'd like to thank you for hearing me today, and I'd also like to ask you to help me introduce my friends from Colorado, Nina and Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. The Rocky Mountains tend to be what people think of when they hear the word Colorado. And they may have a misconceived notion that we're all the same. But our diversity is much more complex than just whether we are a snowboarder or a hiker in those mountains. Oh. Always technology with me. So there are 5 state agencies adding to our complexity, as well as a state-run healthcare exchange that work together with 64 counties and the Governor's Office of Information Technology that build our ecosystem of technology to serve our users. Over the years, with much hard work and a little bit of heartache, we've been able to develop a strong collaboration amongst all of these agencies. Our goal is to help those people who are seeking assistance from one of our programs. And we're very proud of the fact that we've been able to collaborate across agencies. However, we work every day to improve the delivery assistance for our clients. However, we do have a huge gap. And that gap is in our software development lifecycle, where it takes us roughly 6 to 9 months to make changes to our system. But more importantly, within this structure, there's no formalized way for us to uncover and incorporate the user needs. And as a result, we end up doing this in ad hoc ways. We squeeze it in when timing allows, and generally timing doesn't always allow for it. Peak is Colorado's client-facing digital tool where over 1.2 million eligible Coloradans can apply, manage, and renew their participation in over 11 programs. We've worked very hard to ensure that every agency and program had a say in how the systems worked, all with the intention of serving our clients well. And we're not talking just about the 80% of our state's population living in the urban corridor along the Front Range of the Rockies, but also that 20% that are scattered across the rest of our state. We had the best intentions, but the site we developed isn't always as simple to use as we'd hoped. We created an elaborate system that attempts to meet all of our regulatory and policy requirements for all of those programs. And as a result, our system isn't always as intuitive as it should be, mainly because we didn't ask our clients up front and on an ongoing basis whether or not we were meeting their needs. We knew we were at a crucial point in Peak's development, but didn't know how best to tackle the issues. We had the commitment to improve us and to improve the user experience, but we didn't have a solid plan. And as part of the Integrated Benefits Initiative, we have a unique opportunity to rethink exactly how we build our technology. As a neutral third party, Code for America has helped us to assess our needs and prioritize our action steps. They have also continuously guided us on strategies to keep putting our clients' needs first.
Our collaboration with Code for America has been focused by the guiding question: what is the client experience applying for and maintaining public benefits in Colorado? We have asked this question before, but this time the way we answered it was different. This time we changed the conversation. We stopped speaking for our users, and instead we were going out and speaking with them. We asked users of all ages, from all parts of the state, with many different life circumstances. What's working for you? What are the challenges you are encountering? We had honest conversations with our clients, as well as county frontline workers who engage with our clients every day. This is whom we serve. This is whom Peak has to work for. One of our key lessons was seeing how the experiences of the client and the county worker are inextricably linked. We are starting small. One example is improving how clients report a change in their life. and making it easier for county workers to process those changes. We could have started by trying to redesign everything, but instead decided to start small by redesigning the output Peak generates, the receipt in PDF form of the change a client reported. As we've gone about redesigning this PDF, we have stayed focused on meeting clients' and county workers' needs. By continuously getting feedback from county staff and clients, we have been able to arrive at a new design. Here's what a prototype of the new PDF looks like. This new PDF meets the following needs. It highlights what client information has changed, only displays the relevant information, and clearly reflects the client's intentions. This may seem like a small change, but for us, it's tangible proof that you can start with user needs. We also anticipate that this will immediately make it easier to process thousands of the changes we receive every month. In addition to starting small, we are going back to basics. If we want a user-driven system, we know there are a few things we have to do. Here are our new basics. We have to know and align around the outcomes we want. To achieve those outcomes, we have to develop product roadmaps that will map out the vision and direction. This means meticulous, ruthless prioritization. We have to always ask ourselves, what are the user needs we're trying to solve? And we have to look at our development lifecycle and think about how we can always incorporate user research and feedback in every technology project. This is hard work, but we are committed, we're excited, and we've cultivated great partnerships. There is strong representation from Colorado here at Summit. We're energized about this work, and we'd love to talk with you more. We work for the people of Colorado, so if we're going to serve them, we have to know what they want and need. Thank you.
Thank you to Laura and her team. We're going to keep it moving and get you out to the break, but just a couple more notes from Dan and me before we go.
So after the break, we're going to be kicking off the rest of our program, which we've organized into 3 tracks: digital delivery, civic innovation, and GovOps. These are just handy guidelines, so feel free to choose one track and follow it all day, or mix it up and match.
We've got all kinds of content coming at you, as you've seen from the program and the app. We've got more track keynote deep dive conversations on this stage, right at 11, featuring Dan Hahn, and breakout sessions all over the place. Lightning speakers will take place again out there in the hallway, and our interactive session featuring the Civic Hall project, the Civic Tech Timeline, is also going to be going on all day today. All of this content was brought to you this year by an incredible committee of about 24 volunteers spending their time over the last 6 months with Dan and me to pull this program off. So a huge thanks to all of our content committee for this year's summit. Let's give them a round of applause.
All right, just a little bit more. If you're starting to get hungry, lunch is going to be right next door at noon and is generously sponsored by Deloitte.
And as you go throughout the day, we want your feedback on all of the things you're attending, new and old. At the end of each breakout session, there will be an opportunity to pull out your app and give us some feedback. Please do fill out those session evaluations. It'll help us figure out what to keep for next year and what to introduce into the mix.
So let's head out to the break, go meet someone new, welcome them into our tent, and don't forget to join us tonight at the Tech Fair reception in the lobby.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.